welcome to another painting class. Today we are going to paint a painting that has been requested by one of my students. It's an abstract floral, so it's mostly abstract, but it's got hints of the idea of a floral painting in it. I have gone ahead and already painted my background black, and my black paint is still wet, so we're ready to get started. The first thing I'm going to do is mix myself some gray. So I'm just taking the black that's left over on my brush and mixing it with a little bit of white. And I'm also grabbing a couple of drops of water in there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create sort of a foreground. It might imply the table that the flowers are sitting on. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And we're going to trust that this is going to sort of blend a bit with the black background that we've got. So what I'm doing is I'm applying very light brush strokes as I go, thinking more about the action of the brush strokes and the actual placement of the paint, grabbing a little bit of water to help that go a little smoother. And every time I grab water, you might hear or see me tapping my brush several times on my cup, because I don't want any uncontrolled drips to happen, at least not at this stage in the painting. Drips are generally welcome in abstract painting, depending on what your intention is for the painting, but you don't want drips to happen unexpectedly, or maybe you do, but I don't, not right now. So I go ahead and I tap the excess water off of my brush so that I can go ahead and paint without that happening. Okay, so I'm adding a little bit more white accents here and there. They're blending with my gray. I just want to have lots of beautiful variation in the color, and there it is. That's my foreground. And so in the background of this painting, the painting that I'm referencing, that the student gave me and said I'd like to learn how to paint something like this, there are implications of the leaves of the flowers. I'm going to go ahead and give my brush a rinse. It's always good to give it a good scrub down at the bottom of your paint water. If you're drinking coffee or wine, make sure you're not rinsing your brush off in your wine or your coffee. That would be included in the drinking the paint water that we're going to try to avoid. Okay, so I'm going to mix myself a green. So green is usually mostly yellow with a touch of blue. And this particular blue that I'm using, which is phthalo blue, creates a really, really bright green. And I'm looking for a bit more of an earthy green. I know that I've got some wet black paint on my canvas, so I don't really need to add black to it, but I could add a freckle of red to bring that into a more earth tone. And as you can see, it kind of made a golden brown because I added a little more red than I wanted. So I'm going to add a little more yellow and a little more blue. Bring it back to a green tone. That's a nice earthy green tone. I'm also going to add a little bit of white. And this is not for the sake of lightening the color, although it does do that slightly, but increasing opacity so that it's not so translucent when it goes onto the canvas. All right, I'm just looking at my reference picture here. And I see that there are some vague leaf shapes. So I'm going to make some vague leaf shapes. Okay, they're larger. Again, because it's abstract, it's really not that important to make it really specific. And what's happening is that my black is blending with my green, and this is what I wanted, because this is just meant to kind of fall into the background of the picture. You might have a leaf or two sort of falling over the table a bit. Go a little further into areas where I know there will be flowers, but I'd like those flowers to seamlessly overlap these leaf shapes. And they're such incredibly vague shapes. They're really, really not too specific. So let yourself move. Okay, if you want to enjoy your painting experience, get into the motion of it, the way it feels to move that brush on the canvas. And that will also ensure that you have the right amount of paint on your brush. Just feel the way it's applying to the canvas. Is it creating resistance or drag? In which case you may want to add more paint unless that's the effect you're going for. All right. So I have a few leaf implications right here. I might add a little bit of that green into some areas here, just real loosely, just to break up this background. Okay, so now you hear that scrub, scrub, scrub. Okay, I'm doing that to create a blending effect into the background, scrubbing it right in, creating a little bit of different tonality in these backgrounds. Very subtle, but with abstract painting, you want to remove any indication of your intention. You always want to make your abstract paintings look like they kind of just happened. And so you just let them happen. That's how it goes. All right. So in the original painting that I'm looking at, it has a hint of some golden orangey stuff happening in here. I'm always looking at the under layers first. What's happening in the background? Lay that down before we go for the foreground. So I'm just mixing some red and some yellow together with whatever green was still on my brush, okay? And letting that happen. So I'm gonna brush a few brush strokes on here where I'm adding water. I didn't tap my brush this time because I know I want to have a little bit of drippage happening here. I've also got my painting leaned forward onto the lip of the easel. That way I can access the very bottom and it doesn't get cut off by the easel, okay? So here we go. We've got some of that golden color. I might add a little more yellow and red to that. Get a pop of a brighter accent of that, maybe a bit of white to make that come through real nice and bright, adding lots of water to it. Going in here, I'm adding this now to the leaf because that seems like a natural place for that color to be sort of coming from. Okay, good enough. We're going to go back and use those colors again. For the centers of the flowers, there's a little bit of that golden brown happening. So luckily I have some of that left on my palette. Rinsing off my brush, giving it a good dry on the paper towel. And I'm going to come in with some of that white. These flowers are going to be white. And I'm going to mix a little bit of water in with some of my white. So a lot of these flowers have some drippy things happening. And what I'm going to do, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do like a circular motion to just kind of create the space where the flowers come from. Later after that, on our second go around, we're going to add some leafy shapes, okay? This is kind of cool because it allows the center to be a little bit darker. Okay, some of these flowers might want to overlap each other a bit. So I'm looking at the way that the color is occupying the space, but also not trying to create too much of a pattern with this, just allowing the flow of it. A lot of times I make brush strokes that I'm not even intending to do, and then I look back and see how I can accent those. So you have to allow the medium and the tools themselves to offer inspiration in what's happening, okay? So I'm making a couple of big roundy shapes. I'm not sure what kind of flowers these are. There might be one here that's kind of facing that way, right? And by facing that way, what is happening is that instead of going in a circle, I'm doing sort of just curved lines, which implies the rest of the circle happens behind it. Okay, that's how I get the flower to appear that it's facing that way. Over here we have one that might be facing upward, and again, happy to overlap a previous flower, all right? And I kind of want to make this one bigger and bolder a bit. Okay, so I'm going to allow some water drippage. I'm accentuating the water drippage. I'm adding a few drops of water here to let some of these drip down. You can also experiment with using a spray bottle if you like. I might tap a few little sprinkles onto the canvas. I really, really want to imply that this entire process was very random and loose. And it kind of is. That's what we like. So I'm going to move on now and add a little bit of color into the centers. Okay, so I'm taking a slightly smaller brush. I'm grabbing up some of that golden color that we mixed, which was the red and the yellow with a little bit of the leftover green. Adding a little more yellow to that to brighten it up. Maybe a bit of white to increase the opacity of it. And lighten it up and brighten it up a little bit. And I'm going to tap that into some of these centers. And as I tap, you see how it brings out some of the black background. And that's so cool because it's adding dimension, okay? And it's picking up some black on my brush. So I added a bit more color to my brush because I was getting all that black on there. And as that was happening, ooh, this flower I might do facing this way. This one doesn't have much of a center because of its direction, okay? And this one here, a little bit. So now I've got a bit more of the subtle center areas of the flower. I'm going to highlight those with a little bit of hot pink. I'm just adding a bit of white to some red. It's going to be still a very dark pink. And again, I didn't rinse my brush because all of these colors are sort of going to work together and do something cool together. So rinsing the brush is not always that important unless you're looking for a really, really specific and bright color, in which case, of course, rinsing your brushes is very important. Okay, so now I have the background, the basis. And what's going to really start bringing this together is adding the petals to the flowers. So I'm going to go ahead, which brush do I want to use? I think I'm going to use a medium round brush for that. See how that goes. I'm looking at my reference picture here for the shapes of the flower petals. They even look a little bit square on it. I could use a flat brush, like a bright, I think it's called. I'm totally self-taught, so the names of brushes often elude me, but I believe that this little square one is called a bright. I'm going to try that. So we've got this little square brush that you can see. I think it's called a bright. I'm going into my very clean white. Now to add some brighter elements to this. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to start bringing some petals, okay? And they're still dragging out some of that black, which is really a good thing because it increases the dimension of what's happening. So I'm very gently applying this because I want that white paint to sort of rest over. And look at that. I got a blob there. What are we going to do with that? We're going to make it into some petals of this flower. This is how we do with abstract painting. I almost wish more of these petals looked more like that blob. Happy accidents. We love those. That's what we're going for. Real chill. Real chill. Okay, going back to the flower I was working on. Make that a little more cohesive with the rest of the flower. Alright, so which way are these petals going? Out from the center, all over the place. And again, this is not a direct replica of the inspiration piece. I'm not even attempting to make it exactly the same, but just something that has a very similar feel so that my student can learn how to do this style of painting, okay? Beauty. I'm loving how this is looking already. Okay, so this one, the petals are all coming up and then draping down. And I'm going to do that one first because the two next to it overlap it. So that gives me an opportunity to overlap these ones over that one when the time comes for that. All right. Bring this overlapping. See how that other flower falls behind. These petals on this flower are looking a little rounder. They sort of are going, because of the direction of the flower, they're sort of going around the center because it's facing right at you. This one might have a bit more of that too, rather than those pointier petals. Alright, this guy goes all the way up here, facing in that direction. And then this one back here almost has no personality or character at all. It's kind of just hanging out behind this exploding peony or whatever type of flower it's supposed to be. Okay. There's a few bold splats of paint in the original. Some bold white splats. Go for that a little bit. And we're going to add some more drippy stuff. So adding lots of water to my paint, bringing that to the bottoms of these petals so these petals can start dripping their stuff all over there. Okay. I want to kind of control some of this over here. Uncontrol some of that. I'm loving those splatters. Let's get some in here. Good idea. Right. I like the accent of more drips right here too, so I'm going to go ahead and bring some more water and white paint into that. Yeah, and allow it to be. Awesome. I'll bring a hint of another flower up in here behind. Okay, and it can be as simple as that. It doesn't have to be much more complicated. I'm going to work on a little bit of more color going into my background leaves, and it's partially because I'm just waiting a bit for some of those flowers to dry a little more so I can add some more white that will pop. Because no matter how much I layer that white while it's wet, it's not going to come out right. Flower here. I didn't add any of my red to it yet to make it earthy, and see how it created a sort of an emerald tone. Yeah, so what else can I add to this? That's pretty much it. So go in with a larger brush and some more white, and just let some white areas stand alone. So I'm kind of using the larger brush to smooth out some of the areas where I had a lot of brush strokes, make them move a little more subtle. The way I'm applying that, I'm just putting my brush flat on the canvas and sort of sliding it down so that it binds some of those previous brush strokes so they don't look too mechanical. And just allow it to be real nice and smooth and natural. Ooh, a little bit of pink got in there. That's nice. I really like that. I'm starting to run out of white paint on my palette. I'm going to take that as an indication that we're done. So, there you go. A quick little abstract that will do wonders for decorating your dining room or your kitchen. And you know, you might spend 20 minutes on it, you might spend 2 hours on it, depending on your feeling. Stop when you feel like it's done, and just allow it to come to be. I'll sign that masterpiece. Don't forget to sign yours, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much.